Tonight's topic is going to be about what is the purpose of all the stars and galaxies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the world. We began the series of the 70 most difficult questions several weeks ago, and this time we did it in a certain order. We began with creation, we went on to evolution, the purpose of creation, the age of the universe, and now we're going to talk a little bit about this wonderful universe that we're in. The galaxies, the planets, the stars, and eventually we'll talk about the human being, about the woman's role in life, and so forth. So this is a very interesting question. What is the purpose of all the galaxies, the millions of stars, the billions of stars, the planets? And you may ask, why is this a question? Well, believe it or not, a lot of Jews bring up this question. It bothers them. If there is a creator, assuming that there is a creator, what's all of this for? Why is this necessary? In other words, some people are a little bit confused by this creation, and they may think, well, if there's so much of everything out there, maybe it is random, because if it's not, then what is it for? So I figured it is an important question to address, especially if we're going to prove that there's a certain order, that there are certain laws that is guiding this creation, that is guiding our life. And if we have a better understanding of the mechanics or the mechanisms of creation, we will have a better understanding or a deeper understanding of how Hashem runs His world. Even though we will never fully understand everything that there is to understand, even if we were to live for 1,000 years, our mind is limited, and in our physical body we definitely cannot know everything there is to know, and we cannot ever see what there is to see. But there's a lot that we can learn from what the rabbis have told us and what the Kabbalah has documented, and that sheds a little bit of light into this wonderful creation. So the stars and the planets and the galaxies definitely have some meaning to us, and that is why I decided to elaborate a little bit more about that tonight. We've made it already clear in the past that everything that was created in the world, it's created. Once you understand that something is created, nothing is created for no purpose. Everything has a purpose. From the smallest insect, the smallest cell actually, to the greatest galaxies of all. Everything has a purpose. Even scientists will agree that it just makes a lot of sense and it's very logical for all organisms that we have, for them to coexist. There's a certain dependency in creation, just like we see, even though we don't always understand, but we somewhat see that there's a need for the spider, there's a need for cockroaches, even though women have a hard time understanding what the cockroach is doing in their kitchen, but it's there for a reason. And the same is true with the vulture. Take the bird. Everybody know here what the vulture is? The vulture is a kind of bird that is in charge of cleaning up. You know, just like we have here on Mondays or Thursdays, we have these cars that go up and sweep the streets for you. Hashem also has these sweepers. They come and eat the carrion, as it's called, right? The dead animals. Otherwise, if the dead animals would be around, you know, there's bacteria, people would get sick. So that's the job of the vulture and other birds that eat animals that have died. Their job is to clean up. So in the same way that these creatures all have a purpose that is easily observable, the same is true with those things that are further away from us. Some of them are observable, and we can see their effects on us. One of them is the sun. Up until recently, we knew that the sun provides light and provides warmth. More recently, they realized that it also provides energy, as it is seen today with solar panels and the like. So even though the sun is 93 million miles away approximately from the earth, nevertheless, it provides a tremendous amount of light and heat and energy to this world that we live in. The moon, as you know, has some control over the tides the low tide, the high tide. It has some control, and that is also very significant. So these are somewhat observable bodies, observable celestial bodies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the world, that we see. It is easier for us to see their immediate effect and the benefit that we derive from them in this world. The Kochavim, the stars and the galaxies, which are much, much further away, and therefore less observable to the naked eye, it is more difficult for us to therefore understand what purpose did they have, because they're so far away. Nevertheless, the Torah does reveal to us in Parshat Bereshit some of their influence in this world, or what their necessity is. One of them is leha'ir, to illuminate the sky at night when there is no sun. They help a little bit. Starlight is not that bright, but it does help a little bit at the night. Plus, they're also there le'otot u'le'mo'adim. They're also there for us to help us establish our calendar, to be able to figure out when the holidays are. And le'otot. I'm going to get into that in a moment, what le'otot means. The word le'otot means as signs. But the mo'adim part is very important. As you know, for Muslims, one of the most important holidays is Ramadan. And since the Muslim calendar is completely lunar, it can happen any time of the year, in the winter, in the summer, in the fall, in the spring. Because it's all lunar. Most of the world uses a solar calendar, and it's also not completely accurate. The Jewish calendar is the most accurate calendar of all, because it reconciles through a very complex and sophisticated system both the lunar and solar calendar. And it is very important that the two be reconciled, because the holidays need to happen at certain times of the year. Pesach needs to be in the spring, for example. So because of that, the Jewish people take pride in their calendar, because no one has ever come up with such an accurate calendar. And the rules governing this calendar are leMoshe Sinai. They go back a long time. Even though today it's pretty much automatic, it does not depend on witnesses seeing the new moon. Nevertheless, it depends on certain rules. And these are very, very strong and predictable rules. In other words, if you want to figure out when a particular holiday will happen 10 years from now, it is possible to do if you follow these strict rules. So the purpose, therefore, or one of the reasons for having these celestial bodies that we're more familiar with, the sun and the moon, is also to provide us a means to regulate our time, which is so important in Jewish life. Then comes otot. Otot is signs. In other words, if you pick up your eyes to the sky, you may be able to figure out if Hashem is upset at you. There may be some signs in heaven. In what form? In the form of comets. After all, what is a comet? Just a shooting star? What is Hashem playing ping ball upstairs in space? Pool? Shooting a star? What is a comet? It has a tail. It's not just for telescopes to see and to catch pictures of. There's a reason for a comet. I grant you that not everybody today is an expert in what the meaning of every comet is, but it has a meaning. That is our tradition, that all that happens in the sky, all events, whether they are regular or not, every 70 years, makes no difference. It still has some significance. The same is true with an eclipse, solar and a lunar eclipse. And the same is true with sunspots. We may not know for certain what all these mean, but we know that they definitely have an explanation for it. So even though these stars and these galaxies are so far away from us, so far removed, nevertheless we know that they have a certain influence over the earth. And this influence is also seen in a completely different science. It's the science of astrology. Because that introduces, in other words, a whole different topic where the stars do exert an influence, even though they're so far away, in a way that is not observable. I just shared with you some examples of phenomena that is observable, heat and light, and more or less the rotation of the various planets, the moon, the new moon, the sun. You know, these are things that we can measure and we can predict and we can establish certain rules that will help us with our calendars. The otot also serve as signs, but not only as signs, they also serve to remind us that there is another system out there of rules that govern or that influence this earth as we know it. And the influences come about in the science of astrology. Depending on the hour and month that you're born, it will determine your mazal. The word mazal means coming from above. There's a certain shefa, certain influence that comes down from above, and it will determine what kind of a life one will have. It won't determine everything. We still have free will, but it's an important influence. It's an important influence that we need to reckon with. It's something which is hard to understand, how something that's so far away, like stars and galaxies, can have an influence down here below. The rabbis tell us that these galaxies are incredibly powerful. The stars also have an influence on the grass and on the plants. And that has been somewhat scientifically proven, that certain things grow at night. And not only do they have an influence over the stars, according to our tradition, over the plants, the stars also have an influence over minerals. In other words, the gold, the iron ore, the silver, the copper, zinc, all of these minerals, somehow their growth and their development has something to do with the stars. What we see from this, in some ways, is that in the same way that this universe was created to serve mankind, because mankind, the human being, is the crown of all creation, in the same way, all the galaxies and the stars somehow were created to influence or to serve planet Earth. Because of everything that exists in the universe, planet Earth is the center of everything. I'm not talking about the physical center necessarily, but it's the center, meaning the most important part of the whole creation. So if everything in this earth that we know of is there for us to benefit from us, in other words, it's there for us to use, then everything that's out there in space and the galaxies and the most farthest stars from Earth are there to serve in some way this planet Earth. That's where all the attention is. That's where all the influence is coming to. Whether it's from the sun or moon, or whether it's from the other stars as well. Now, it's a little bit hard for some people to understand whenever I talk about this. How could it be that the mazal from millions of miles away can affect somebody at the moment he's born? We just said before that depending on the moment and the hour of birth, one receives a certain mazal from above, which is dictated by the position of the stars. And the stars are very far away. Now, when I say stars, I'm also including planets. So some people have a hard time with it. Okay, it's hard to prove. But how could you say that something from millions of miles can have that influence over a little baby that's being born in Indonesia? Right? All the way from far away? Yes, regardless of where he's born, there is some configuration of the stars that will produce a certain influence. And the best way to understand the distance problem is with the sun. The sun is 93 million miles away. That's far, 93 million miles away approximately. And everybody, I think, in this room knows that tomorrow is going to be 65 or whatever because of the sun. I mean, without the sun, we would freeze. Maybe a little bit cold now, but that's not called freezing. Right? So we see, even though this body called the sun is so far away, it still affects us. We still see the light. It still warms us up over here, even though it's so far away. So it's not too difficult to understand how something so far away can nevertheless have an influence. Just this one is so obvious to us. Remember the old way of speaking on the phone? 200 years ago, if you wanted to speak to somebody on the phone, how would you do it? Anybody know? How would you speak to somebody down the block if you wanted to speak to him?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah.
No, something similar to the phone system today. What would you do? Two boxes, remember that? Remember we used to make those in school? Right, with a string. Now, does that make a difference how far those two boxes are? There's a connection. It may take longer to travel, it may not be as audible. But as long as there's connection with a string between two objects, if you move one object or you do something to one object, you will hear or get some effect on the other side. Is that right? Does that make some sense? Does it make a difference if the string is 100 yards or 100 miles? Not really. If there is a string, a cable, I mean, we see it today. I mean, today we have satellite phones, but the first phone systems introduced using cables under, I mean, how do we talk from New York to London? They put over the Atlantic Ocean underwater cables, real cables, connecting thousands of miles away. Does it work? Yeah. So why can't we understand that there is a cable from here to 10 million miles away? The only problem we have, there is a cable, but we don't see it. That's the only problem. So it's not that it can't work. It's just that we don't see it. You know, so just because we don't see it does not mean it doesn't exist. Right? Today, it's even easier to understand it. Do you need a cable? Pick up your cell phone and you speak to Israel. If you would tell this to your great-grandfather, you think you're crazy. I mean, I can talk from here to Israel just by picking up this little object and talking into it, and he will hear me there? Well, the rabbis already said this many, many years ago, when they told us that as soon as a baby is born, Hakol shelo nishma misof ha'olam v'ad sofo. The voice of the baby travels from one end of the world to the other end of the world. There are certain voices, the rabbis tell us, and the Kabbalah expounds on this more, there are certain voices that can be heard from one end of the world to the other. But wait a minute, but we don't hear. Just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it can't be heard. If man were to develop the right machine to be able to pick up these wavelengths that we haven't discovered yet, we would be able to, to see its effect. We can't hear a baby being born in Australia, but that's what the rabbis tell us, that the voice of the baby crying coming out of the mother's womb can be heard from the end to the other end of the world. Somehow it could be heard, it could be picked up if we had the tools to pick it up. So distance is not a problem, it's just that we haven't developed a way to see or to hear this other wavelengths perhaps. And there are various wavelengths here. There's sound travels, there's light traveling, there's various waves. Right? There's FM and there's AM. Right? In the radios, different kinds of signals, just that we haven't picked it up. Remember I think it was it the Galileo, the spaceship or the satellite that traveled beyond the solar system. It's already now beyond the solar system. And all the energy that it had and all its battery power was the amount of battery power you have in a light bulb. And it was transmitting data as it was going through the solar system. The further it went away from the solar system, from Earth, the longer it took for us to receive that information. Whether it was pictures or data, whatever it was. Of course it took longer because we're talking about the speed of light, or the speed of sound, or whatever it is. Obviously the further it went, the harder it is to receive. But it's still giving information from far from billions of miles away. And this is without any cord. So this we accept, this we understand somewhat, even though we don't fully understand how it works, but within the scientists figured it out. Then obviously what's going on in the universe is that Hashem has a system that is much more sophisticated than the system that we've come up with, that is able to transmit messages, information, influence from millions of miles away from all these planets and galaxies, and things that we don't see. Just because we don't see does not mean that it doesn't exist. So what have we done just now? We've seen how it is possible that this world is really not such a big place after all, because things can travel and get to us very quickly. However, There's another Gemara that says, no, 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 don't get it wrong. This world is a big place, very big place. And today, of course, we know it. We look around, we see that it's billions and billions of miles away. And even though things can travel pretty quickly, nevertheless, the rabbis do discuss the distance between the various heavens. There are 7 heavens. And they tell us that between every heaven is approximately 500 years. Now, what is that 500 years exactly? How long it will take us to walk there? How long it will take us to travel there? Is it the speed of light? We never understood what the Gemara really meant. Today that we have an idea of how far, or how fast I should say, the speed of light travels, it's easier for us to understand this. That 500 years could be light years. And the closest star to the Earth is 3.4 light years. Now you know what a light year is? Light travels 286,000 miles per second. 286,000 miles per second. Multiply that times 60 to get a minute, times 60 to get an hour, times 24 to get a day, times 365 to get a year. And you're talking about trillions of miles. And the closest star is, I think, 3.4 light years away from the Earth. So I don't think anybody's going to get there in his lifetime, no matter how fast he travels. Right? Because if you can't travel in the speed of light, not yet, they haven't figured out how to do that. So it's very, very far away. So the rabbis already told us that this world is a big place, that there are 7 reki'im, 7 heavens. And if you ask, well, why did Hashem make things so far away? Why are the galaxies so many billions of miles away? Even though it's true that they can influence us, but why do they have to be so far away? Those of you who were here when we spoke a little bit about Kabbalah, we spoke about the concept of tzimtzum. One of the most central and important concepts in introductory Kabbalah. Tzimtzum means to compress, if we can translate it so. Compress. There's a tremendous amount of light out there. Just look at the sun. You can't look at the sun. Could you stare at the sun? It would hurt your eyes. All right, so what do we do if we want to look at the sun? We use filters. Right? And what do the filters do? They somehow diminish the strength, the intensity of the light that we are able to, to see it. Tzimtzum means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took this immense amount of light from His own and in the world and compressed it to something that is tolerable for this world. Because we live in a physical world. And the physical world cannot take too much of this light. Too much. If the sun would be a little bit closer, we would all burn up, right? Just with the sun, we're able to understand what this immense light is. And the sun is one of the smallest stars in this universe. The smallest star. And this sun, you know how many times it's bigger than the Earth? I think you can fit several thousand Earths into the sun, into the diameter of the sun. Several thousand can fit in. And this is something so powerful. Could you imagine all the galaxies? So the idea of putting them in that distance perhaps has to do with the idea of tzimtzum. In other words, they're so great and so immense that they have to be billions of miles away, otherwise it would be too much for us to handle. Their force, their gravity, I don't know, their light, something about them would be just too much and too powerful. And therefore they have to be in the place where they are. Because everything that Hashem created in the world has a tremendous amount of energy. But in order for that energy to be suitable for the earth, He had to create a tzimtzum. He had to compress it to bring it down to the level that we can handle. That is why you may come across the term tzevakot. Anybody here heard the term tzevaot? In Hebrew, tzava means army. Hashem has tzevakot. Hashem has His armies. What are the armies of Hashem? He's called tzevakot, Hashem tzevakot, because all the celestial bodies, and all the, including the angels, is part of His army, if we can call it that, because they serve a certain purpose in this creation. So the millions or billions of stars and galaxies are all part of this Sevakot, are all part of Hashem's army in doing something to serve a purpose in this creation, this world. What is the difference between this world and those worlds? In this world, we have a subdivision of the physical parts in the following way. Domem, Someach, Chai, Medaber. A subdivision of the physical world as we know it and as we recognize it is in four. Domem is the most inanimate object you can imagine. A rock is called Domem. Domem means inactive, inanimate. The next level, which is a little bit higher, is Someach, that which grows, the plant. The next highest level is Chai, that which has life to it, animals. And the highest level of all is the human being. Medaber, he has the ability of speech. So this physical world as we know it is divided into these four. Why am I telling you this? Because you might say, well, what are all the stones for? What are all the rocks for? And I'm going to tell you now a little secret that may surprise many of you. You know that everything in this world, even that which is domem, has life to it? Has a, like you said, a neshama of sorts in it? Yeah. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more, how we know, how scientists even know that today. That everything in this world has some neshama, or some hayut, some life to it. And of course it has a purpose. Obviously
energy?
No, it's not called energy. It has a life. It has some sort of life. Something that, some sustenance that makes it what it is. Not only do they all have life, the entire creation from the most inanimate objects to the human being also give praise to Hashem. They recognize who the Creator is. We don't hear their voices, but when you hear the whale or you hear the birds chirping, they're not talking about you necessarily. They may be giving praise to Hashem. The angels do, and so do the animals. Just that we don't understand their language. But they understand and they are fully aware of who the Creator is. Unfortunately, much more so than many human beings. Because they don't have a Yetzer Hara. They don't have the evil inclinations. So for them it's easy. So that is a physical subdivision of the world as we know it. Each one having a purpose. And not only having a purpose, in order to have a purpose you have to have a certain life, a certain neshama, I guess we can call it. If we further subdivide the components in this physical world, what do you get? You get a subdivision of the actual elements that make up this physical world. Esh, Ruach, Maim, and Afar. You have the fire, you have the air, you have the water, and you have the earth. From the highest to the lowest. Why is the earth the last one? Because that's the most physical, that's the most chomri, the most material. We just said, we talked before about Tzimtzum. This world is a physical world. The physical world cannot handle too much of that light, of that spiritual light. It's very physical, it's very earthy. It has, you can feel it. You can't really feel air, right? It's so light. But you can feel water, you can feel earth. The further you go down, the more you can feel. The physical senses can feel it. The element of fire, unless of course you come close to it and you see it's warm, or you can see it. Otherwise you really can't sense anything. It's something way above us. Air and fire are much higher than water and earth, which go down. These two tend to go up, especially fire. It tends to rise. Nevertheless, everything in this physical world is comprised of these four. Even though everything in this world is comprised of these four, scientists have figured out and have discovered that they thought that the smallest object or the smallest thing in this world is an atom, or the neutrons, or the protons, or the electrons running around. Lately they have discovered that there's something even smaller than that they cannot even see, that is giving what you mentioned before, the energy or the sustenance to the object. It's giving life to the object. It's making it work. It's making it survive. It's making it stay in one piece. A piece of rock or anything, a metal. That there's something even smaller that he can't even detect. And that something smaller, which they don't know, is completely not physical. It's something spiritual. In the same way that the neshama, the spirit that we have in our guf, is something spiritual, not physical, you can't see it. In the same way, there's something in every domem, in every inanimate object that you cannot see, that's holding it together, that is giving it life, that's giving it sustenance. That's the physical world. What about the spiritual world? The spiritual world, Kabbalah mentions, is also subdivided into four. You have Abiyah. Abiyah is the abbreviation Aleph, Bet, Yud, Ain of Atzilut, Beriyah, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. And this is the world of Asiyah. This is the world of action. This is the world of physical formation, of doing. Asiyah, La'asot. Whereas all the other worlds above it are much more spiritual worlds, spiritual realms, spiritual entities. And that which is spiritual, the physical eye cannot see. We can't even see electricity, which is somewhat physical too. Right? Because of the way it's produced, it's physical. But in reality, is it physical? I mean, it's the energy that comes out that is not discernible by the eye. But we know it exists. I don't think anybody wants to put his finger inside the outlet. Right? We know it exists. There's a lot of things, therefore, that exist that we don't see. Just because somebody might tell you, I don't see God. Does that mean he doesn't exist? You know, that's not a good enough reason to say that he doesn't exist just because you don't see it. Okay, now we've come to a very important question. Is there life anywhere else? Right? We just spoke about this physical earth. We just spoke about the planets. We just spoke about the stars, that they all serve a purpose. They're all part of the armies of Hashem. Right? So, have you ever heard this question before? Sounds familiar? Is there life elsewhere, other than this planet Earth? I've heard that men come from Mars and women come from Venus. I don't think there's anybody living in Venus. It's very, very hot there. It's about 900 degrees on an average day. What? And in Mars, it's I think 220 below zero. That's on the side facing the sun. So anyway, based on scientific evidence, there doesn't appear to be the elements necessary for survival, for life to be anywhere. You need to have water, you need to have oxygen. They're always claiming every other day in the newspaper, they've just found water on Mars. It's all baloney. They haven't found water on Mars. They've seen ripples on the sand. And they say those ripples, it must have been that the water flowed once over there. You know, they're trying to dig and dig and dig, and they spend so much money on Mars where they could have fed all the starving people on this planet for many, many years had they not wasted that money in Mars. But anyway, they're trying to justify continuing to teach evolution in high schools. So they have to show that, you know, life just sprang out everywhere. Look, we found it here, we found it there. That's really the reason, one of the reasons behind it. The other reason is they probably want to send up somebody to live there for a while. They have to figure out a cheap way of, you know, if you can get water from there instead of shipping it to him. Yeah, that's what that's what I've read, about the importance of trying to find water in these places. But anyway, is there water? Is there life anywhere else? Scientifically, they haven't found it yet. It doesn't make sense that they should, because you don't have what's necessary to produce life. This is a perfect place for life. Right? You have the sun just close enough, just right. You have the atmosphere that's just right. You don't have this atmosphere, you don't have this sun anywhere else in the universe that we know of. But what about in a faraway galaxy where you also can possibly have a sun and have an atmosphere? What about that? So anybody have any ideas? Is it possible? What do you suggest? Any volunteers? Is there life? Could there be? Does the Torah say anything about it? We have a tradition. Hashamayim shamayim Lashem, ve'aretz natan libnei Adam. The Shamayim, the heavens, belongs to Hashem. This land He gave to us. Right? We human beings, have this earth. This earth belongs to us. Not Uranus, not Neptune, not Pluto, and no other planet. Yes?
Well, why can't He give some other kind of land to a different kind of being?
Oh, I'm going to get to that. Yeah. But human beings, as we know them, that have free will, that receive the Torah, the Jewish people, civilization as we know it, most likely, and I'm using the word most likely for a reason, doesn't exist anywhere. That's the Torah position. However, if somebody ever proves that there is life elsewhere, it will not contradict anything that we've studied. Because it doesn't say anywhere that there isn't. It doesn't say clearly anywhere that there isn't for sure no life as we know it elsewhere. So therefore, if somebody ever discovers that, we say, okay, great. Let them send us a postcard, what it looks like there, so what, fine. It won't contradict anything. But what is the consensus and what is our tradition? What is the opinion? We do have an opinion. And we do have a very clear position that as far as we know, there isn't. Now, what did I just say before? Life as we know it. Human beings with free will. Are there other creatures elsewhere? Yes. B'ezrat Hashem, I think in a couple of weeks from now, we'll be talking about what are the angels for and what are the demons for. Shadim. We have friends in this world. And some of them are not so friendly. Malachim, angels and demons. Everybody here know what a demon is? If you never see one, you can go to Melrose. There's a whole bunch of them at night, late at night. Some of them have purple hair, No, just joking. They may look like demons, but I think they're human. But you sometimes wonder. So when we talk about demons and angels, B'ezrat Hashem, what are they here for? What did God create these things for? We'll talk about these other creatures. However, the Zohar does say that within this world, you don't have to go to Mars, you don't have to go to other galaxies. Within this world is like an onion, I think the Zohar says. An onion has various layers, right? And in all these layers within this earth, we have different creatures living with us that we can't see. So you don't have to go elsewhere. So if you tell me that there is other creatures elsewhere, I'll tell you don't have to go too far. You have them here too. I don't think they're elsewhere, but I know for sure they're here because the Zohar says so, and we know for a fact that there are other kinds of creatures that live with us in this world, other forms of life that have no neshama, that live within this world with us. As far as other places in the world, not necessarily, most likely not. Because what did we say in the very beginning? That was the question of tonight. What is the purpose of all the galaxies and the stars? It's not to provide life. There's enough room in this world, on this globe, for all the kinds of life that Hashem put together. They are there for a different purpose altogether. They definitely serve a purpose. Hashem created them for a reason, but not to provide life or a place to put your foot down. If there is, fine. There's a lot of all kinds of creatures that Hashem created in this world. And they are actually with us here too. Now we've come to another question. Even though this question is more perhaps a question that should be asked when we spoke about the age of the universe. When we spoke about the age of the universe, we mentioned, of course, the opinion that some people hold that it's millions of years old, and our tradition that says that it's 5,767 years old. And we went through the various methods of figuring out the age, including carbon-14 dating. And our tradition is very clear that every day of creation is 24 hours, even though there is an opinion that says it was more than 24 hours, just the first days of creation. because 1,000 years in the eyes of Hashem is like one day. So there are various opinions about the first days of creation. But then come the smart Alex. I call them smart Alex because they don't delve into the subject too much and they think they have something smart to say. But wait a minute. It says somewhere, Bonei olamot umachrivan. Hashem created worlds and destroyed them. Perhaps the dinosaurs are from those previous worlds. And that would explain how everything is millions of years old. Have you heard that? Bonei olamot umachrivan. Hashem creates worlds and destroys them. If that's the expression that is to be found, if you look hard enough, you will find that expression. That God creates worlds and destroys them. Well, if somebody were to take this at face value and literally, translate it like that, what would you think? Well, yeah, perhaps there were other worlds and we are one of his experiments. After all, what is he doing? Creating and destroying. Experimenting. Didn't he do that with the Mabul? No, the Mabul was a whole different thing. B'ezrat Hashem, I think we'll be talking about that next week. I think, B'ezrat Hashem, we will talk about that when we talk about the subject of why does Hashem destroy the world, why did he bring a flood, various floods actually. But nevertheless, Bonei olamot machrivan is also very appropriate for tonight, because the meaning of Bonei olamot machrivan means spiritual worlds. It has nothing to do with physical worlds. So therefore, if anybody tells you there are other worlds out there, and he uses this expression, Bonei olamot machrivan, there are other worlds, we're talking about, the Zohar says, spiritual worlds, nothing to do with physical worlds. In other words, there are certain spiritual worlds that HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates or erects and then destroyed in the very beginning when he was creating this world. What is the meaning of building and destroying? It's a Kabbalistic concept that is very difficult to explain, but it has to do a little bit with the tzimtzum that I mentioned earlier, with getting things down to a level that we can handle and we can tolerate the greatness of Hashem. There's a Mishnah that says, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lanachil tzadikim shai olamot. HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the future, after Mashiach comes, will reward the tzadikim, those who are righteous, with 310 worlds. I mean, this world is pretty big. He has to give us 310 worlds. The 310 worlds are spiritual worlds. It has nothing to do with physical world, because all the reward is spiritual in nature. So whenever you see these concepts, it's very likely that we're talking about a spiritual world, not a physical world. As to why the galaxies are so large to begin with, there is an opinion that's brought down that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made them large, made the stars large, made everything large in this world in order to awaken man. If he were to look up, if he were to stop his life for a moment and look up, Marabu Ma'asecha Hashem, how great and how wondrous are all your doings, that this is supposed to inspire awe and fear in him for the greatness and majesty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just look at us, look at yourself. What is a human being in this earth? A little speck, you can't even notice him. I mean, even Israel is barely noticeable from space, the land of Israel. A human being. And in this great universe, what is the planet Earth? Small, you can't even see it in the universe. And man, nevertheless, man is the greatest of all because of the neshama that he has, endowed from God himself, a certain divine spark in him, that he has the greatest power of all, in a sense, to be a partner in creation. But nevertheless, the greatness and the vastness of this universe is also intended to inspire us as to the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. What we can see that is easily observable to us, and perhaps is also something that requires further investigation, is as to why is everything round? Did you notice that all the planets are round? Why is everything round? What is that? I'm sorry? Yeah. Why is everything round? What does round mean? Anything that's square has limits. Something that's round has no limits.
Has no beginning.
Has no beginning, no end. That's exactly like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is described in the Kabbalah as Ein Sof. No end. There's no end to the universe. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu put limits of His own, the physical world is in itself a certain limitation. Everything is constricted here, it's limited. But in reality, there is no limit to everything. There is an Ein Sof, just like the round circle. Everything is round, it has no beginning, it has no end. Just a little bit of food for thought. It's an interesting point. Also, we need to remember that everything in this world is governed by certain rules. Everything is governed by certain rules, but the underlying rule, the most important mechanism or engine, I guess you can call it, is a certain koach ruchani, a certain spiritual energy, that is moving everything. The earth, for example, rotating on its axis. How does that happen every day? It never fails. Even though in this world, everything that we know is physical, what is pushing everything is a certain koach ruchani, a certain spiritual power that is moving everything along. The rabbis tell us that if that koach ruchani, which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, would stop for one moment, everything would self-destroy. Everything would cease to exist. Yeah. Now, there's something else that's happening in this world. You may have read certain articles in some science magazines that one of these days a comet may come crashing down, or an asteroid. They're even trying to figure out how to destroy. It's time to change the batteries on this thing here. They're trying to figure out how to destroy an incoming asteroid that's going to invade the Earth. They don't have to do that. The Gemara brings down that HaKadosh Baruch Hu protects us from any possibility that the comets or the asteroids get too close to Earth. Because if Chaz v'Shalom, any of them, the large ones especially, if they would come crashing down on Earth, everything would cease to exist, life as we know it. And some scientists claim that that is how the dinosaurs disappeared. B'ezrat Hashem, when we talk about that, I think next week, I will show you that that's not necessarily how they disappeared. We don't need that theory, even though it is true that there have been some comets that have fallen apart, or some asteroids, smaller ones, that continuously come raining down on this Earth continuously. There was one in Tunguska region in Siberia, in Russia, where you can see the effects still to this very day of how much destruction it leveled in a very large piece of land in Siberia about 85 years ago. There's pictures of it. They say they don't even know what it was. They think it was a comet of some incredible amount of power that just blew off an entire area of trees. But anyway, it's possible. But for a big comet or a larger comet to come down, Hashem has no reason to destroy His beautiful Earth. I mean, if He needs to destroy a certain region, He has hurricanes and tornadoes and other forces to do the job. But large swaths of large areas, no, that never happened, never will. So the Gemara says that Kadosh Baruch Hu protects us and doesn't let any large comet get too close. Again, what we see is a certain level of supervision, not only in this earth but in the entire universe, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not only running the show, He gives life to everything, and He allows everything to continue to exist because of the spiritual power that is within everything that He created in the world. And I think that is best expressed in the pasuk that we say in the Tefillah, HaMechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit, that He renews life daily with His kindness from scratch. Everything is renewed from scratch. Everything is given life from scratch. When we wake up in the morning, our neshama is given back to us. When we were asleep, we were half dead or 3/4 dead. And we wake up in the morning, the first thing a Jew says is what? Modeh ani lefanecha. We give thanks. We don't take anything for granted. We give thanks to Borei Olam that He has given us a new lease of life. He has given us back our neshama. Unfortunately, not everybody is aware that they have this neshama. But in reality, the reality is that everything in this world has a neshama, as we said before. It's not done. No. It's not done yet. No. Everything in this world has a neshama, including the largest galaxies and the largest stars and systems in this world. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu obviously put them there for a reason. In order for them to continue to survive and to continue to provide us with the influence that they give us, then there has to be something moving them. And that is the neshama that everything has. And B'ezrat Hashem, in the coming weeks, we'll get a little bit more into it when we talk a little bit about the rest of creation, especially the crown of all creation, which is the human being himself. Yeah.
So nothing new is ever being created, Rabbi. Is that what you have that position and understand? You said there's a certain force.
Right.
Nothing new is ever being created.
Nothing new is ever being created. En chadash tachat hashemesh, Shlomo HaMelech says. There's nothing new under the sun. There is discoveries, but what is discovered has always been around. It's not a completely new invention. People say, "Oh, he just invented something." No, it's always been around. He just discovered it. He just realized how to do it. But it's always been around. Yeah.
You just said, if I understood correctly, that everything is somehow recreated every day.
Everything is recreated because every day Hashem gives it its life force, or allows it to exist, and which makes it survive, which gives it new life. I'm not sure if everything came out, but let me know if it came out on both sides. It was having batteries and having some trouble.
Looks like it didn't go all the way because
could be. Yeah, if not, I have it here. So just try it out.
But that you put in CD if you want to copy it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you want, I don't need it's up to you.
To try it. Maybe it did go.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we understand, Rabbi, the thought that Avram, before he became Abraham, he was able to look at the stars and understand that he would not have any children based on the stars' alignment? How do we understand his understanding of that concept that he knew he was going to be childless because of the stars' alignment for his name? It was only when Hashem told him to add the hay to his name that he was able to have children. How do we understand that? Right?
How do we understand that? How he knew?
How he knew?
He did not know. He was being taught that. That is one of the lessons that Hashem was teaching him. That not only did I create the mazal, I have the ability to change it for you. He did not know that. Up until that moment, all he knew was that Hashem created the world. And he also knew that Hashem runs the world, that He supervises the world. He did not know that Hashem can also change the world, can change the mazal. For example, Am Yisrael, when they left Egypt, they thought this God only knows how to hit, how to deliver plagues, how to punish. They did not know that He also could provide food and water and do good things and be kind. They were lessons for them to be learned during the 40 years in the desert.
Rabbi, in that point about Avram, he was able to look at the stars and discover that astrologically he was not able to bear kids. They're not able to have.
Right.
How was he able to understand that?
He had that knowledge. It was a knowledge that was around forever. I mean, from the very beginning. And they actually knew it better than we know it today. So he learned that. He studied that, and that is a science that was around and has certain rules. As long as you know the rules, you can know a lot about different things. Yeah.
Why did Hashem configure the universe where the earth revolves around the sun as opposed to the sun revolving around the earth? And why was the earth made the third planet as opposed to simply a sun and an earth? Why this surplusage of useless planets?
Well, we said before, in the very beginning, right, that the whole configuration or the purpose of creating all the planets is that they serve a certain purpose. So Mercury, being the closest planet to the sun, serves a purpose from that position. What follows is Venus, right? And we're in the third position. Well, we're in the third position for a very good reason. We can't be too close for comfort, right? It would be too hot.
Well, why wouldn't why wouldn't the Earth just stay within its scope of orbit so it doesn't get too close? Why the necessity for the other 8 planets? And more importantly, why wouldn't everything revolve around the Earth? Why wouldn't it be configured that way?
Well, first of all, there was an old argument in the various schools of thought whether the sun rotates around the Earth or the Earth rotates around the sun, and not everybody was clear about that. Today it's obviously clear that the Earth rotates around the sun, but the sun rotates too. Everything in this universe rotates. Everything is always in motion. Yeah, everything is moving, and that scientists have also been able to see.
But if human beings are the crown of creation,
right,
and we're on Earth, and there's no other life elsewhere, why wouldn't Hashem configure it where everything would revolve around the Earth?
You mean that the sun should rotate around the Earth?
Logically speaking, yes.
He could have done that. Yeah, obviously. He could have done a lot of things differently. Yeah, but obviously there's a reason of why the sun, being the largest body in the Milky Way, is more, I don't want to call it more stationary, but it is more fixed than everything else that is smaller that rotates around it. It is the king. The sun is the king, right? Remember the measures between the sun and the moon? They had a fight, who will be the king? Who will be the most important one? Even though the earth is the center of everything, of life, but the sun is still the king. The sun still has a certain position. Look what it does for us. So we therefore rotate around it instead of it rotating around us.
Rosh Chodesh is the moon, Rabbi.
It's the moon, sure. That also has some significance too, but it's small. The moon is small, but nevertheless has some significance.
And they look like they're the same size.
What?
And they look as if the same size.
Yeah, exactly, because of its distance. Yeah. So anyway, I hope this helps a little bit with understanding the mechanics of the earth, that everything has a purpose, everything is by design, everything is in such great order and in harmony. And in order for that to be in harmony and great order, there must be somebody that is running the show, that allows it to continue to be so. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week with the rest of the questions.